Okay, let's unpack this. We're diving into some really gut-wrenching news coming out of India.
Yeah, that Air India flight crashed just minutes after takeoff from Ahmedabad.
The scale of the tragedy is immense. But there's this one detail from the sources that's almost unbelievable.
The single survivor.
Exactly, a single survivor. So we've gathered reports, BBC, NPR, others, laying out the facts as they came in right after.
Right.
And our goal here is to guide you through these sources, pull out the key insights, really understand what happened, the human side of it, and how they're starting to look for answers.
Makes sense.
So looking at all this, what's the first thing that really jumps out at you?
Well, it's just the sheer devastating number of people. These reports confirm it was London-bound Air India flight Thursday.
Went down just minutes after leaving Ahmedabad.
Minutes. And crucially, not over an empty field or something.
No, the sources are clear. It struck a medical college hostel.
Right.
Right in a residential area.
Which, tragically pushed the casualty numbers even higher, not just those on the plane.
So the death toll climbed fast. What are the confirmed numbers we're seeing?
The reports confirmed 270 people dead. That includes 241 who were on the flight passengers and crew.
And the rest.
And at least 29 people who were on the ground in the area that was hit. Just devastating.
And then, like we said, amidst all that loss,
the
sources mention this one detail that just stops you.
The sole survivor from the flight itself.
Yeah, one person managed to escape, they say, through a hole in the fuselage.
That's what the reports indicate. A British passenger. And last we heard, he's under observation, but actually doing well.
Expected to be discharged soon, they said. Such a stark, contrast. One life saved against so many lost.
It really highlights the chaotic nature of something like this. Almost impossible to comprehend.
And the sources, they really bring home that human impact, don't they? The scene afterward.
Oh, absolutely. They paint a very difficult picture at the hospitals, the morgues in Ahmedabad.
You read about the families.
Yeah.
Just raw emotion, grief, anger, frustration.
Demanding bodies, demanding answers. Understandably.
There are these heartbreaking examples right in the reports, like Ghulam Rasool asking for his friend Jabid's body.
Or another man just shouting, "Give my son's body back."
And Rafiq Abdullah searching for his nephew, his daughter-in-law, 2 grandchildren, all on that flight.
And the incredibly difficult reality facing them, which the sources describe, is the condition of the remains.
Charred, mutilated.
Yeah.
Making identification just, impossible by sight for many.
So they have to rely on DNA, collecting samples from families to try and get a match.
And that process.
Yeah.
How long does that typically take?
Authorities mentioned it normally takes up to 72 hours. They said they're trying to expedite it, but...
But for the families waiting, every minute must be agony. You can feel that frustration in the reporting.
Definitely. At one point, some reports mentioned only 11 victims had been identified through DNA. Just 11.
Was anyone identified early on?
Yes. One name mentioned was a young medical student, Aryan Rajbit. His family was able to take his body home.
But they're also seeking answers, right? Wanting to know why.
Absolutely. And meanwhile, back at the crash site itself, just grim scenes described.
Empty coffins arriving.
Yeah. And officials working in really tough conditions. The reports mention the heat, the humidity, even recent rain.
Trying to recover everything they can, crucial evidence before it degrades.
Yeah, exactly. So while all this human tragedy is unfolding, the search for actual answers is starting.
Methodically.
The government's response, what did the sources say there?
They're speeding up the investigation. They've formed a high-level committee, multidisciplinary.
And this is separate from the official crash inquiry.
Yes, separate. This committee's job is specifically to look at causes and figure out procedures to prevent future emergencies.
Okay.
Yep.
And central to any crash investigation. The black box.
Absolutely crucial. And the sources confirm it was recovered.
When and where?
Found on Friday, the day after the crash, around 5 p.m. It was retrieved from a rooftop near the crash site.
That black box, it holds the key, doesn't it? What exactly will it tell investigators? Well, the AIB, that's the Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau, they say they're working with full force on it.
What kind of data is in there?
You've got 2 main parts. The flight data recorder, which logs all the technical stuff, engine settings, control inputs, speed, altitude, you name it.
And the other part?
The cockpit voice recorder. Captures all the conversations, alarms, sounds in the cockpit. Together, they give a critical window into those final moments.
So, based on what experts usually look for, what are investigators likely focusing on right now with that data?
There's an aviation safety consultant, Jeff Guzzetti, quoted in the reports.
Okay. What does he suggest?
He suggests they'll be looking very closely at things like Were the wing flaps set correctly for takeoff?
Right. Critical setting.
Definitely. Also, any signs of engine power loss, what alarms were going off, and, it's interesting,
What's that?
whether the crew correctly logged crucial pre-flight data.
Like what kind of data?
Yeah.
It seems basic, but
Things like the outside air temperature and the aircraft's weight, passengers, cargo, fuel.
how does that matter?
Well, Gazzetti points out that miscalculating or inputting that data incorrectly, it can directly affect things like how the flaps should be set for a safe takeoff.
Wow. So seemingly small details have huge implications.
Exactly. It shows how much complex aviation relies on precise human input and procedure.
And assuming that recorder is okay, is there any sense of a timeline for getting some answers?
Gazzetti suggests, yeah, if the data extraction goes well, we could potentially get some initial answers about the direct cause, maybe as early as next week.
Okay. Let's step back a bit. The aircraft itself. What do the sources tell us about the plane?
It was a Boeing 787 Dreamliner, 12 years old.
And the 787? How does this incident fit with that model's history?
Well, experts cited in the reports note there are about 1,200 Dreamliners flying worldwide. And what's significant, according to these sources, is that this appears to be the first fatal crash involving a 787 in its, 16 years of operation?
The first. That's notable. The sources do mention Boeing having safety issues, though.
Yes, but they're careful to specify those previous issues have been with other types of Boeing aircraft, not the 787 before this.
Got it. And what's the immediate reaction regarding the rest of the 787 fleet in India?
India's civil aviation minister announced immediate inspections. Air India's entire fleet of 787s.
All of them. How many is that?
They have 34 Dreamliners. The reports mention 8 had already been inspected shortly after the crash.
And the rest.
To be examined with immediate urgency. That's the phrasing used.
So if we kind of zoom out and look at everything we've pulled from these sources, the crash itself, the human cost, the investigation starting up, the aircraft details, it really paints a picture of incredibly complex systems, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And what's fascinating, I think, is how the search for truth here is happening on so many levels at once.
Oh, sir.
You've got the really painstaking forensic work, identifying victims against terrible odds.
Right. Then the technical side.
Yeah, the deep dive into that black box data, trying to piece together the seconds before the crack.
And then the bigger picture.
And the broader systemic review looking at procedures, the fleet itself, it's all interconnected, all vital to get the full picture.
So we've walked through the reports, the stark details of the crash, the profound grief we're seeing, and then these methodical steps being taken to figure out what went wrong technically and procedurally.
Yeah, covering a lot of ground there.
It leaves you with a question, though, doesn't it? When you consider everything we've just discussed,
What's that?
what does the emphasis on seemingly small details, like accurately logging temperature and weight, as Gazzetti mentioned, and how that tiny input can impact something as critical as wing flaps? What does that tell you about just how fundamentally reliant we are on absolute precision, on procedure, to keep these huge, complex machines safely flying?